There's growing evidence that the French Coast Guard failed to respond adequately to the migrant boat that sank in the Channel a year ago exactly. 27 people died when that boat sank. Several others are still missing. Only 2 passengers survived it. Documents seen by the BBC suggest that French operators repeatedly told passengers to call the UK, despite evidence they were sometimes in French waters. Our Paris correspondent Lucy Williamson has this report from northern France.
Tragedy has changed little on the Channel. 1 year on, the flow of migrants has only increased. The deaths of at least 27 people didn't even change the cost of a passage. The risk of disaster already priced in. Twana was 18 years old when he called Coast Guards from the sinking boat a year ago, a young footballer from Iraqi Kurdistan. His body has never been found. His brother, here in France to help the investigation, said his advice was always, if you're in trouble, call the police.
The 2 survivors confirmed they were constantly in touch with French and British authorities, continuously sent them their location. After reading the legal report, I found that their phone calls were dismissed and answered with mockery. These people were not viewed as human beings.
The French Coast Guard first received a distress call from the boat at 1:48 a.m. At that point, it seemed to be half a mile inside French waters. Documents seen by the BBC suggest operators did not call in rescuers as promised and instead contacted the UK. They repeatedly told desperate and screaming passengers to call the British Coast Guard. "You're in English waters," one says. "Wait, I'll transfer you to the UK." Another tells French emergency services they've been calling non-stop. "We know they're more or less in the English zone." Boats in trouble can drift between French and British waters, complicating the rescue response.
I believe that vessel is now in UK waters. Do you agree?
And there are warnings that resources are increasingly stretched as small boat crossings rise. France's Sea Minister told Parliament that any negligence found by the investigation would lead to sanctions. There are people here who say this was a disaster waiting to happen, and it's not the only time desperate passengers have been passed back and forth between rescue teams in Britain and France. We've heard evidence that another migrant boat calling for help from the Channel experienced the same response just a few days before.
When the 999 is talking, they said call to French, and when the French they said call to United Kingdom, and the both of them is laughing at us.
These messages were received by a migrant helpline in Dunkirk 4 days before the Channel disaster. Raphael Cousin, who took the call, says a French lifeboat came to rescue them.
So when someone is in distress at sea, they just need to be saved as soon as possible. So it's no time to talk about like who is going to save who and in which port are they going to be returned.
1 year on from the Channel disaster, investigators have yet to report their findings, as each month thousands more steer their way between trust and tragedy, aiming for British shores. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Calais.